You're listening to the Raising the Bar podcast, brought to you by the Association of Gray's Inn Students. I am Eleanor Johnson, one of those students, and I'll be having a chat with barristers and wannabe barristers alike to demystify the route to the bar. Today's podcast is hosted by Gwyn Evans and Verity Bell, who'll be talking about the new Gray's Inn LGBT Society and what it has to offer.
Hello, this is good afternoon here. We're at Gray's Inn, we're in the advocacy training room, and we are with Alex from the education department who's recording us. Now you're listening to Verity Bell, who sits opposite me. Say hello.
Hello.
And I'm Gwyn Evans, and Verity and I are together committee members of the LGBT Society. So, Verity, do you want to tell our listeners what is the LGBT Society? The Gray's Inn.
The Gray's Inn. Oh, don't forget the Gray's Inn. The Gray's Inn LGBT Society was set up to try and provide a forum for mutual support for all lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans, queer, intersex and questioning members and staff of Gray's Inn. We hope that by promoting the visibility and inclusion of LGBT barristers and students and role models within the Inn, we can help promote and celebrate LGBT role models in the profession.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about why you thought that was necessary when you came to the bar? Because you're more junior than I am. I'm about 12 years
what,
old.
What do you do, Gwyn? Who are you?
Well, I'm a barrister at Tanfield Chambers, and I do property law and private client work and matrimonial finance. So I've been doing this for about 10 years practicing and 2 years doing other stuff before end of training, bit of fill-in, that kind of stuff.
I am a former Bedingfield and residential scholar of Gray's Inn. I finished my BPTC last year and I start pupillage next year.
And what made you want to start a society like this at Gray's Inn?
I think there's a real perception of the bar and of barristers being a certain sort of person, and that person is white, that person is male, that person is straight, that person is old, that person went to private school. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to set up the LGBT Society is really to help displace that sort of paradigm old-fashioned barrister and really celebrate some of the diversity that is in the profession and make it more visible. Why do you think we need an LGBT society, Gwyn?
Well, we've got Free Bar and we've got BLAG.
What does BLAG stand for?
BLAG is the Bar, Lesbian and Gay Group. I've always thought that's a little bit of a black and white label because there's no room for bi or trans in the word. I suppose you could have BLAG, so it could be the bi, bar, lesbian, etc. But I don't think that would work. As well.
Too many consonants for the T as well. No, Free Bar is inclusive of all of those groups and says quite explicitly on its website.
And Free Bar's quite well funded by various sets of chambers as well, isn't it, from what I can see, and has sort of relatively big events with quite notable speakers and the like. I think BLAG is probably a little bit more social. And we've taken elements, haven't we, from both of those sides of things.
I think what makes Gray's Inn LGBT Society different from those bar-wide groups you mentioned is that the Inn has a kind of unique access to student members, so people taking the bar course, people taking the GDL, about at the very beginning of their careers, really starting in the profession. And they might not feel so at home in a big professional network, whereas at Gray's, we're small, we're friendly, and you really promote those relationships, sort of informal and professional, between students and more established practitioners.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that a lot of the sort of collegiality, I suppose, that happens at the Inn is the events run for students when you have students come along, either people who are on the BPTC or people who are at university. And I remember when I was doing it, when I was training and I met judges or barristers or whatever, and had good conversations with them about all sorts of things. Can't remember talking about LGBT plus stuff, however, and I think it's probably good that doorway is now open. So
absolutely. I think that's encouraging. I think it might be worth talking about our first LGBT society event, so the launch event. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, we had an event in May, and Bree Stevens-Hoare, QC, and S. Chelvan came and they spoke to us about their experiences of being LGBT at the bar. And also we talked about the statistics that the Bar Council, or is it the Bar Standards Board, provide. So where I think with the practicing certificate, every barrister answers questions if they want to about their gender, their ethnicity, whether they're from the first generation of their family to go to university, and whether they're disabled, and whether they're what age they are, what religion they would subscribe to, and so on. They're protected. Thank you. They're protected. Suite. They're protecting characteristics in all of them. And there's one on sexual orientation, and basically they're quite high level. So you look at all students, then you look at all junior barristers, and then you've got silks. And I think there's possibly a pupils category as well. And so there's 4 categories, and you can give an answer to the question, or you can have there's usually a rather not say, or there is a didn't answer the question. And the first 2 characteristics, so what sex you are, 99.9% of people I think answer that question, and then you come down to what your ethnicity is, that's about 80% answer the question, and then everything else, fewer than 50% of the respondents actually answered the question.
So there's a big black hole, we don't know.
There is a big black hole, so we don't know what the other 50% of those people who could have answered the question would have said, which is sad actually. And part of it, I suppose, is because what order you fill surveys in. If you do the first 2 questions and think, oh my goodness, there's 10 questions, I just haven't got time to do the other 8. Survey fatigue. But I did wonder whether it sort of spoke more about what people are prepared to talk about, and that in itself, I think, reveals that people are a little bit more uneasy about talking about what sexual orientation they are, or whether they have a disability and so on.
What would you say to people who would take the view that I don't mind what you do in your private life, I don't mind what sexual orientation you are, I just don't want you to bring it to work?
Well, I think you are you. I mean, you're not taking your private life to work, but part of your makeup is going to be what your sexual orientation is. Or if you're trans, what you've chosen to be your gender, what gender you are, how you present. And I think particularly for a trans person, that would be really hard to mould themselves in a way that they feel would be a fundamental conflict with who they are. And I think there's a lot of assumptions in the workplace that people are straight. I'm not saying this particularly about the bar, but I've temped for all sorts of people when I was in my 20s, and I used to be an actor, and you just realise that people make assumptions about who you are based on what you look like, or based upon what everyone else around you is like. And actually, if you can't be yourself, I think you're probably going to be less productive. And one of the things we need to do as a barrister is to cover a lot of ground and get a lot of work done. And I think if you're dealing with an anxiety that you are unable to express yourself in a way that you feel would lead to you being accepted, and hence you're inventing an alternative identity or whatever, that I think you might find that you weren't very happy.
I suppose it's difficult to do your best work if you're in the closet.
Yeah, that.
I think the other factor is possibly because the bar as a profession is quite collegiate, and obviously while there are employed barristers, the majority of barristers are self-employed. There is a degree to which you bring your whole self to work, and your practice and who you are as a person are quite closely intertwined in a way that might not be true for every profession.
That's very true. I was on a student advocacy training day last Saturday at Gray's, and the silk who I was doing the training with said that the way you are in court is as an extension of your personality, and everyone's different. And I'd never thought about it like that actually, but I think that's really true. So I agree with that. I think that if you are able to not be hiding something at work, because people do talk about, whether they're married or whether they've got kids or whether they're in a civil partnership or whatever, then I think that you're going to be more able to be honest with your clients or with your colleagues, and that can only be a good thing. And we all know how much honesty is valued at the bar as well. The irony, were we to be forced to hide who we are. So, look, I think actually the bar is probably a better profession for LGBT plus people than other professions.
What makes you say that?
Well, I think there's a lot of people who are here because they want to fight for the underdog, for their clients. And so I think people notice what's different about people. I don't know whether that only applies to certain parts of the bar. I mean, you'd see that probably in a particularly pronounced form at, say, the employment bar, maybe the family bar, and probably at the criminal bar.
But it shouldn't depend on the extent to which your practice is switched on about equality issues.
No, it shouldn't, should it? And so that brings us to what we can do about it. So do you want to tell us what's happening in December? Because we've got an event planned.
We do. We have an event on Tuesday the 3rd of December 2019, held obviously at Gray's Inn. And the point of that event is to have a panel discussion on judicial diversity. So we've rather provocatively titled it Judicial Diversity Should LGBT plus Representation Matter? And we've just spent some time talking about why it does.
Yeah.
But obviously, compared to other protected characteristics, so perhaps sex or race or even disability, someone's sexual orientation isn't immediately obvious if you're sitting behind a bench. So I think that's why we titled it the way we did, not because we don't think that LGBT plus representation matters.
And we have a glittering panel. We have Master Victoria MacLeod, who is trans. We have the Master of the Rolls, Sir Terence Etherton, and we have Dorothea Gartland, who's a barrister at Four Paper Buildings. So
she's also a deputy district judge.
And a deputy district judge, yes.
All of these people will be appearing in conversation with Her Honour Judge Rowe QC, who is a family judge. And we're hoping to really encourage everyone, irrespective of how close they are to making applications for the bench, to come along. We'd love to see students. We'll be kicking off at 5:45 p.m. in the large pension room, but you will need to book online.
Yeah, and that's on the GIOS system, so that's the Gray's Inn GIOS. And what's more, we have refreshments afterwards, and those refreshments might be alcoholic for those of you who want to drink some alcohol, so there you go.
Jolly good. I
think we're going to have the first panel of LGBT plus judges, and I think that's really important.
Is that true? The first one?
I think so. Freebar had several judges speak at their inaugural event, but I'm not sure it was exclusively judges. So I think we are the first in this respect.
Great. I was going to talk about how I got the idea to suggest setting up an LGBT society. I don't want to make it seem like a one-woman show. It's definitely been a more than collaborative effort.
Well, I remember that you approached the education department when you were a residential scholar, and you suggested the idea, and then they approached me, and I'm on the barristers committee, and so we talked about it, and then I formulated a proposal, and etc. etc. But where did it come from? Why did you want to do that, and how?
I had my interview for a residential scholarship in 2018, and at that scholarship interview I was asked what I would contribute to the inn, or what I would bring to Gray's Inn if I were to get the scholarship. And I had suggested on my form starting an LGBT society, but I didn't mention it in the interview. I didn't want to sort of come out to a panel of people who were assessing whether or not I should get a scholarship. And it was actually a member of the panel who said, look, you mentioned this on your form. I just want you to know that if you set it up, we would be 100% behind you, and you would be supported in doing that. And I have to say that's absolutely come to pass. And I remember as a scholarship candidate being shocked at the extent to which my perception of the inn as this very crusty, very backwards institution was completely changed by the efforts of those in the education department, those in senior positions in the inn, who absolutely, without a shadow of hesitation, were behind this LGBT society getting off the ground.
Presumably that was your impression of all inns rather than just Gray's Inn.
Of course, but I did only apply to Gray's Inn.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was a good idea because I went to an interlaw diversity event, and it was about the Stonewall Workplace Equality Index. And that's a list of companies who have gone through some assessment exercises to evaluate how well they meet LGBT plus friendly criteria, I suppose. And there are a lot of big, obvious, quite high net worth firms in the list. So a lot of blue chip solicitors, magic circle firms. And of course, you've got an HR department, or we've got a diversity officer or whatever, an equality officer, then you're going to have the ability to actually go through the form. I understand it's quite a time-consuming exercise to fill it all in, and then you have to actually make changes in the workplace, which means you've got to get buy-in from your governance boards or whatever. And I did wonder why there were 2 barristers' chambers in the list in the legal sector, and you would have thought, given the number of barristers' chambers, which I think is it's over 700, I think, barristers' chambers in the country. I'm looking at Alex, who's sitting here. Alex, do you know how many barristers' chambers there are?
No,
there you are. Okay. I know it's definitely over 700 because I have occasion to count them recently, but I can't remember the number. And you would have thought there'd be more people, particularly the big sets, who would buy into this, and seemingly they don't. Well, there's 2. I won't name them. I probably get their names wrong, but there's 2 very obvious ones. And one of the things was that there's a cost factor to it, but also I think it's about changing a mindset. And so if all the Magic Circle firms are doing it, and not just Magic Circle, but a lot of firms that have a medium-sized number of employees but who are committed to this, then I think it's really important the bar does it as well. And so that's sort of political, isn't it? Because that's about saying that it's not good enough for the bar to do nothing.
I think it's the shift from sort of quiet, polite tolerance to celebration and inclusion of a diverse bar. And I think the next generation of barristers coming through, for them it's something they take quite seriously.
I think there's been a sea change as well since I was sort of at your stage.
Tell me, I'm really curious, what was it like being a young gay barrister?
Well,
however many years ago that was, I don't want to speculate.
I did my pupillage in 2008, and the set I was at was relatively straight-laced, and there was a gay barrister there, but I got the impression it was a bit unusual, and they didn't take me on, but they didn't take my 2 colleagues on either, and they were both straight, as far as I know. So I'm sure that's nothing to do with it, but I didn't feel hugely comfortable being who I was there. At the same time, I'm from a generation that I'm in my sort of mid-40s now, and I was at school in the late 80s, and that was pretty gruesome with the legislation, the
Section 28.
Section 28 of the Local Government Act, whatever it was called, that you can't teach...
promote it.
You can't promote
it to school children.
Homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. That was the turn of phrase, a pretended family relationship. And so then, since then, in the 90s, there were all the changes with sort of age of consent and allowing gay men in the military, and then that being widened and so on and so forth. And so there's been all sorts of legislative changes in my lifetime. So by the time I got to the bar, actually, I think most of that had been done. But I think that people of my generation and older, that their mindset stuck back in the kind of 70s, 80s in terms of how they think about what's normal and about who they are and how they present and what people think about them in the workplace. So I think we could see it in the statistics at the May event. There's a sort of wave of change that's coming through the bar. So there weren't many female silks, were there, back in the day, and that's now increased.
I mean, it's still not great. It's still about, 25%?
Oh yeah, it's far lower than it should be. But it's the same with the judiciary. When you look at the composition of the judiciary, it's no longer just white, middle class, slightly elderly men. There's our panel who are LGBT, and there are also a lot of people from ethnic minorities who are coming up through the judiciary. But it's a slower process because that has sort of had its origins in how open training institutions have been to people, how open solicitors' firms or barristers' chambers have been to people who are not white.
I understand that the JAC, the Judicial Appointments Commission, have launched last year a number of diversity initiatives to try and encourage those from non-traditional backgrounds to join the bench. So we're hoping that event will tie into that as well.
Well, you've reminded me actually that when I contacted one of the judges who I had thought would be a good panel member, and he said that he was the regional diversity judge or diversity champion or some very unusual word for the JAC, for the civil service. And it was his job to promote equality of opportunity in his area. And so I didn't even know that was going on. So I thought that was very encouraging.
Definitely.
I'm sure that actually at our event on the 3rd of December, we can find more out about that.
Excellent. Well, no spoilers, please.
So there's quite a lot going on, I think. And I think we're in a world in flux in modern society, in the legal sector. And I think that's a really good thing. And I think there's a lot of positive things being done and said. There's a lot of groups like Interlaw, Diversity Forum, and we've got Free Bar as well, who are pressure groups as much as they are social organisations or networking organisations. And I think that that's a really good thing. And that didn't exist 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
I think the message to people who are becoming barristers or thinking about becoming barristers is that their background shouldn't and won't determine their success, and won't determine the extent to which they will be included and encouraged in the profession. So that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing.
Well, I think that's our aim, and at Gray's Inn, I know the education department's passionate about reaching out to people who are from non-obvious or non-traditional backgrounds, and I think it's really important because actually you frequently find talent once you start looking for it in places where you hadn't looked for it before. I
think once people realise that they can stop recruiting on the basis that someone looks like them or sounds like them or was educated like them, that's when you start to create change and start to see a real difference.
And I think we could both say we're very pleased to be at Gray's Inn, because Gray's Inn is the inn that supported this society and this initiative, and it's going very well so far.
Absolutely.
Well, it's time for us to wrap up now. So, Verity, I think we have some thank yous to say.
We'd like to thank Eleanor Johnson for letting us on her podcast.
Yay, thank you, Eleanor.
We'd like to thank the Gray's Inn Education Department for inviting us.
Absolutely. And Alex for recording us.
Thank you, Alex.
It's your final recording, Alex, so thank you very much.
Good luck, farewell.
And then if you are interested in signing up to the society or coming to our events, you want more information, there's information on the Gray's Inn website, which is graysinn.org.uk, and then the address is gibc@graysinn.org.uk, and that's Gray's Inn Barristers Committee, GIBC. So that's the way to remember it. And
so many acronyms.
And for this event on the 3rd of December, you don't have to be an inn member. You can be a member of any inn, and there's provision to sign up with a sort of temporary login if you're not a Gray's Inn member, so you can come along to the event, but you have to book. So, it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me too.